Nature Breakthroughs with Dr. Wild Ben Goldman. Conversations with changemakers in a world gone mad. To discover what you need for personal, organizational, and societal change, get your free download of 3 ancient rituals smart entrepreneurs use to bounce back from shifts in the market and inside themselves. Go to www.naturebreakthroughs.com.
Yes, you pull them till they bite down. On the lies that you built from my doubt. I don't want money, I don't want cars, I just want to be free.
How are you doing?
I'm fine. That's not what you called to ask me. Go ahead.
The image quality is not great.
It doesn't matter. You wanted to talk to me, right?
Yeah, but there's a YouTube video made too.
That's okay. Forget the video. Go ahead. What is going on?
My podcast is about change.
Okay.
So it's about change, and you're now in your, is it the 9th decade?
I guess that's true, isn't it?
So you must have seen a lot of change. And
what goes around comes around, babe.
What's the biggest change you've ever experienced in your life, from childhood to today, that had the biggest effect on you?
It had an effect on me. I don't know. Well, of course, the biggest event perhaps was going to the moon. That was amazing, right? I couldn't get you guys to wake up. Some of you wouldn't wake up to look at the moon landing in the middle of the night.
I remember that. I remember we were in Woods Hole.
Wake up. Somebody wouldn't get up. But
my memory is we were in Woods Hole in that little house.
Yeah, that's right.
House.
We were in that little house, and that was a pretty amazing thing. Changes. Let's see what else. I think of people who lived in the 20th century, like your grandmother, who went from horse and buggy to the moon blast. That's really quite remarkable. Well, I'm just trying to think. It's a change for me to go away to boarding school, I guess.
So what was that?
Internet connection's unstable. I'm not sure why my internet. I've been having trouble with my internet. It's unstable, it says.
I know.
And I don't know why that is, but
that's why I keep suggesting maybe we try it on the phone. But we can keep going. There you go. That's perfect. Now we're talking.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Okay.
And then don't be distracted. Stop looking at your computer.
Okay.
All right.
See what my bippies are.
What are your bippies?
How many bippies on my computer? Why it's such a poor connection?
Oh, bippies. BPS, you mean?
Yeah.
The bippies. Well,
yeah, bippies.
But back to the old days before the bippies. You went to boarding school. What year was that?
1950.
And why was that such a big change? What was that like?
Well, you go away to school, and I loved it.
You were high school? That was high school?
High school. Yes, high school.
And you where were you living before that?
I was living in New Orleans and in New York.
And then you went to boarding school in Massachusetts?
Massachusetts, yeah.
And how do you think that changed you, or what was the?
I don't know if it did, but that was a different. I wasn't living at home, and it was. I really liked it. I had a great time.
Well, what do you remember about it that made that come up as the biggest change in your life?
Well, I was just thinking. You didn't not living at home anymore is a change. That's all. So that was a change.
Well, I remember when I went to college, well, part of it was I kind of couldn't stand living at home because there was so much arguments and, it was just kind of, I couldn't wait to get out of it. And then when I got to college, there was no, I didn't have any parents to deal with. I didn't have brothers to deal with. And it was like a whole new world because there was a lot of, I was meeting all these new people and new girlfriends and boyfriends and new experiences. And also I found that what they taught was so different than what we were learning in high school. But I don't know if any of that was, I bet you that none of that is what you were thinking.
That was so true for me. I had gone to New York, school in New York for 2 years, and then I don't know that I thought the learning was so different. And I have been to camp a lot. So going to boarding school, I wasn't homesick. And I don't know, I just really ended up liking it a lot. And I think going to high school, boarding school, I have much closer friends for all these years, 60 years, from high school than from college, because I went to three different colleges. So, I still kept up with some people from Mills College. I kept up with some people, but not from Penn. Well, I still knew a couple of people from Penn, but nobody from Syracuse, really. And then I went to Mills in California, and that was different in a change. The people were different than the East Coast in a way, and the expectations, more people, women were, I guess, taking classes to, to be social workers or teachers or something than the people I knew on the East Coast when I left. And the people were very nice in the West.
You're saying that the women were...
Some of them were, I guess. I guess it depended on who my roommates, my classmates were. I don't really... And I didn't keep up with most of those folks very well. I kept up with a few of them somewhat.
One of your roommates became famous, right?
She wasn't a roommate, but she was a dorm mate. Yeah, she was very famous. She won a MacArthur. She was a dancer, Trisha Brown. She was she was a modern dancer in the 70s, was at Judson in New York, and she died last year. You went to see something with her, of hers, at the, what's the place down in the
Joffrey?
The dance. Joffrey dance. Yeah, Joffrey.
I mean, I saw several of her performances, I think. Did you know when you knew her in college that she was going to be a superstar?
No, not at all. She and I and a third person, Shirley McCauley, I think her name was. The three of us drove across the country in 1955, maybe. I'm trying to think, it was 55 or 56. My mother had gotten us tickets, and Trish and I used to argue over which one it was. I thought it was South Pacific, but she said it was My Fair Lady. So I think it was My Fair Lady. I'm not absolutely positive. And we had matinee tickets, and so we needed to get to New York from San Francisco on a Saturday, some Saturday in June, I suppose. And we wouldn't spend more than $2 a night. We stayed at classmates' houses in Green River, Wyoming. Mary Sudman, who was my bridesmaid, and then in Chicago with, I forgot her name. Those are the only two places I guess we stayed with friends. And then we stayed in a motel-y place in Iowa somewhere. I think it was in Iowa. And Trisha got hysterical because there were little cabins and there were guys sitting around in their undershirts drinking beer in their other cabins, and she was terrified. So we had to the way it worked was it was usually a double and a single bed. And so every third night you could have the single bed. But that night we all slept in the same bed with Trish in the middle, because she was like hysterical about us being broken into, because I think there wasn't a lock on the door and everything. So we practically had to slap her around. But anyway, we got to New York in time to get to the theater. We drove like crazy people.
Interesting. And theater played a big role in your life when you were young, right?
Well, in the summertime, when I was in Woods Hole, the group, but it had other people like Stanley and Betty. And I worked on the stage crew, building the sets and painting them and stuff for several summers. And that was fun. I loved doing that. That was great. I liked that a lot.
But how did you then become so involved in politics?
When I came to Philadelphia, I volunteered in 1963 to work on the campaign of somebody running for mayor, Walter Phillips. He was running against whoever the party person was. He was the more liberal candidate, and I volunteered in this primary to be a poll worker. And also, let's see, I didn't know how to use the voting machine. Why hadn't I voted in 1960? Where was I? I really don't remember that. Anyway, you left the little X's down, and I put them back up. And so the committee person, who was also my state senator, put his hand in the curtain and voted for himself. And then, you know, I didn't know what I was doing. That's basically. But I was also I think there was cheating in the polling place when I was a poll watcher. And that just made me furious, because people should have an honest election, and it wasn't. And then I subsequently learned about the four-legged South Philadelphia voter, which is pretty commonplace. But so that set me off. And then the next primary, or maybe it was in the fall, I don't remember exactly. I got your father to go with me, who was much quicker on his feet. And when they asked for our certificates to be allowed to be in the polling place, he had the presence of mind to asking for the regular Democrats. It must have been a primary the following year. And they didn't have any. One of the people in there was the brother of the senator, and he didn't have a poll watcher certificate. And the old man who was the judge, we threatened that we'd call the committee of 70 on him if he didn't kick the guy out, because they weren't allowed to be in there, you see. And so that's kind of how it started. And then I got involved, and I'm not totally sure how, with Carol Ann Weisenfeld and Hardy Williams and Wilson Good and John White Sr.
I never would have figured you would have credited my father with getting you into politics.
No, I didn't say he got me into politics. I asked him to come and help to see what was going on, and he was just really good on his feet on that. So,
and when you said there were four-legged voters, you meant they'd bring their dog in?
Well, that means, there's only supposed to be two people in a polling booth at a time. One person, everybody has two legs, right? So if there's four legs, that means two people in there. And there's only supposed to be one person in there.
Well, sometimes they
It's a joke. It's a joke. Forget it.
No, I want to know the joke. Some of these.
The joke is, in South Philadelphia, it was very common for like a husband and wife to go in the polling booth together, or for a committee person to go in with somebody and vote with them. It's not. The only time someone can go with you is if you have a card that says you're allowed to be assisted, which usually means you're blind or paralyzed or something, impaired. So, but it was, and there was a woman who lived on 41st Street. I forgot her name. She lived at 251. She owned that building. I can't think of her name. And she was a secretary at South Philly High School. And she could see the polling machines outside her office. And she told me about seeing all these people in the booth, the four legs in the booth. Nice woman. I can't remember her. Her name.
So you went on to become the ward leader and then ran for city council. How?
Right. Well, we started organizing an independent Democrats in West Philly, an integrated group to try to change the politics in West Philly. And we had people from every ward, the 27th, the 46th, the 51st, the 3rd, the 60th, and the 24th, I guess. We had people all over and tried to run committee people. And Charlie Balkin ran one year for state legislator. Hardy Williams ran. He finally won. Rufus Lynch ran. So we were doing things to try to get people to challenge the incumbents and the Democratic machine, and we did that for a while, and then was created something called I can't remember, not the Black Caucus, the Black something. Anyway, so the African Americans in West Philly, then they decided to have their own thing, and so it kind of fell apart. Although we stayed, we were all together, still working on campaigns together. by and large. And I guess what broke it up was in 1971 when Hardy ran for mayor against Rizzo, and there were another couple of people running, and it was clearly obvious that that wasn't going to work to have so many people running. But that's okay. So Rizzo won.
What was wrong with the machine?
Well, they just were corrupt. You know, they weren't very progressive. They weren't including people, really. It was plantation politics. And they weren't pushing for fair housing or fair anything, you know. They were just part of the machine. Hasn't changed that much. It has changed in some ways, but not as much as we'd all wish it would. And certainly in this regime, it's not changed at all. In fact, it's gone backwards.
So when Rizzo, mayor, well, first of all, how long were you, what year did you first become the ward leader? Or first you began as a committee person?
Well, I was a co-founder of that, the Independent Democrats, and I can't remember who all was. It was Wilson. Was it Wilson or John White? I can't remember that we ran and convened it. They used to meet here a lot, and
I remember as a kid that there was.
And then there was a guy named, again, I can't remember his name, lived on St. Mark's Square, and he and I and some others, we started trying to run committee people in probably 1968, or maybe before that, in the 46th ward, which has more homeowners, was easier to do, and we won a few. And then, was it 70, I guess? We ran people in the 27th, and we won enough places to win the election, but they kept us out. That's very complicated what happened. You go to the meeting, they said you had voted for a Republican, you couldn't be elected, you couldn't sit. So we challenged it in court, and we had to come back to Philadelphia the weekend before Labor Day to have a revote for ward leader. And luckily, the meeting started early or late, I guess early, on time, and some of their people weren't there, and not all our people, but our people flew back. I came back from Woods Hole, somebody came from North Carolina, somebody came from Switzerland. I mean, we were all really into it, and the upshot was we won. And the meeting that had kept us from voting was pretty horrible. It was, I don't know if you remember the beer joint on 43rd Street, the wholesale beer place, and had a bar. Again, I don't remember. But that guy, Mickey somebody, was the ward leader, and maybe the meeting was there. Where was the meeting? It was in a crowded place. And somebody banned Saul Goodall on the head with an umbrella. Anyway, we were just furious, of course, because, you know, we had the votes, we had been elected, and we knew we would be because the people in the neighborhood voted in a more progressive way for several years. That's why we went after the committee people. That's why we decided to do what we did. And in those days, the committee people were elected every 2 years. Now it's been changed every 4 years. I guess to make it harder to make change, but anyway. So it was the beginning of we were the model eventually for the whole city. I mean, I started a newsletter and that we gave to voters, and everybody in the city copied that eventually.
I remember.
Because so many Penn students were committee people over the years that, you know, when I was ward leader of one of the other 27th ward people, we sort of trained them all how to do what they should do when they went to wherever they went. And they went around the city, they went and they stayed involved with doing things. I remember in, I guess, McGovern. Was it McGovern? No. I don't remember which election, but I sent somebody to South Philadelphia to be a poll watcher. He got beaten up, not too badly. And he didn't come around election night, wherever we were. I don't remember. He lived on St. Mark's also. But then when I finally saw him, he was so happy he was okay. And then I saw him again a few years later, and he'd become a assistant professor of political science, and he loved it because it was his opening lecture, how he got beaten up by the Rizzo people. Really,
I remember as a kid that there was always people, that you were always having meetings at the house, and also that there was I don't remember what it's called, but you had a machine in the basement that would print out the
Oh, well, that was when I was running for council. Yeah,
would print.
I had a mimeograph machine.
Mimeograph.
Yeah.
Use that for the newsletter.
And, yeah, put out the newsletters.
And so when did you first become a committee person? What year was that?
I think 70.
And then you became the ward leader?
I became the ward leader. I didn't want to be, I probably could have been the first ward leader, but I didn't want to do it. And a young guy, grad student was the ward leader, and then he left to go to Yale. And then Mark Bernstein became the ward leader. And, I had kids at that point. And then Mark he was at law school, and then he went to the Defenders, and he couldn't be political. So I wasn't going to do it. And then this other guy was going to do it, and I just didn't trust the other guy. It was very weird. So I decided to do it at the last minute to become ward leader. And I ran against this other guy. And
what year was that?
75, I think.
And then how long were you ward leader for?
Till 85, I guess.
So for 10 years?
10 years. Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it was mostly while Rizzo was the mayor. What
was it like with Rizzo being mayor?
I say that he sent his head of the party, I forget everybody's name now, out to we had a public meeting with him. He was the managing director, I guess. And we had a meeting just for the neighborhood to talk about problems. And the guy said to the neighborhood, you didn't vote right, so you're not going to get anything. Which is what Trump does, right? He's going to give something to Ohio, but nothing to New York, whatever it is. So nothing changes. Like you say, you want to know about change? It's very incremental. The patterns stay very similar. And you take a step forward and then maybe another little step, and then you probably go back a step. It's very hard to change because people want what they want when they want it. And they want me first, me first, me first. So it's hard to, that's why you have to admire these nurses and doctors and people who are really under such stress, mostly because they have to be family at the last minute to people, which is so hard on them.
How does it feel to be one of the first COVID-19 survivors in America?
It feels good, of course.
You feel like you have a superpower?
No, I must have a pretty good immune system. Must be what it is, because they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
They can't figure it out, right?
They don't know yet. But most people do survive, so that's the good news.
Yeah, and most people are asymptomatic.
But but it can also strike people down in the middle of life for no apparent.
Oh, terrible! And what it's doing to the Black and Brown community, because their health and it's so interesting. Makes me think of your father's early research on stress. When he did with rats and stuff, and we already now know, of course, he was right. It didn't have to do with aspirin. I mean, because he was doing experiments with mice, giving them aspirin and then stressing them to see what kind of birth defects they got. But just stress, I mean, and poverty is just a terrible, terrible combination for people.
And it amazes me when I hear them talk about it, and they use the phrase environmental racism, which relates to
what?
They'll use the phrase environmental racism when they talk about it, that the people of color are dying more quickly.
Right, of course, it is.
So
yeah, and you used it way back when.
Yeah, I didn't realize that my father had done work on stress, and I didn't know he did
Well,
that.
he did it, yeah, he did on rats. He pregnant rats. He gave them an appropriate level of aspirin, and then tied them down during different periods of their pregnancy for a day or so many hours, and to see what happened. And I delivered the rat. I did C-sections on them. And the lab, because I couldn't afford to buy. Huh?
I didn't know you did that.
Yeah. And you race the clock to see how fast you can deliver a rat when you're doing repetitive stuff like that.
How many times? How many rat babies did you deliver? I never heard this story.
I have no idea. Every rat has like 10 or 12, 13 babies.
So
I did several. I didn't do it just once. I did it. I don't remember how many days I did it, how many times I did it.
I remember as a kid, what he had me do was executing them with this little rat guillotine. That was horrible. That's what made me decide not to become a scientist.
Oh, that's too bad.
Or that kind of scientist.
But he should have had you deliver them, then you would have been a scientist.
I never knew about delivering them. All he had me doing was chop their head.
Well, they would, look, I cut them open, so they were anesthetized and then they died. I mean, they weren't alive when I was done with them.
Yeah.
I didn't sew them back up.
No. All right.
I did C-sections, okay,
And, well, I'm also just it's interesting how what goes around comes around. When I ran in Weehawken, and there was so much corruption here. I told you these stories, right? How they beat up my election workers. Did I tell you about that?
I don't know if you told me they beat them up. They went after them. Well, they did that here too.
I didn't tell you the story. Well, at the time I was on election day, I was on my bicycle because it's such a small town where I live, and I would go from one polling place to another on the bike, and and it was in the early days of cell phone. Like nobody had cell phones back then, but there was a couple of them, and we were told there was an incident at the northern part of town, and so I was there within minutes, and the police chief was there, and my guys were all bloody, noses bleeding and all scuffed up. And I asked the police chief what happened, and he said, well, some thugs jumped out of a Jeep and beat these people. And I said, well, what did you? I said, where are they? And he said, well, I told them to get lost. And I'm like, what do you mean you told them?
Who to get lost?
The thugs. I said, what do you mean you told them to get lost? We would press charges. And he was like, well, it's too late. They're already gone. And while he was talking to me, he had his police walkie-talkie, and I could hear the mayor on the walkie-talkie. I never told you this story. I could hear the mayor on the walkie-talkie barking orders to him, telling him, what to do. And so the police is supposed to be an independent agency. It's not supposed to be working for the mayor like that. And
no, that's not. Well, no, the police chief is appointed by the mayor, so I mean they're not independent. But
well, they're supposed to be. Here they're supposed to be independent.
Be involved with that stuff.
Here they're supposed to be independent, and instead the mayor was using the police's walkie-talkie system as his way of communicating with the polls. And then the next day, I mean, it's so corrupt here that it gets even better. The next day, the newspaper, which was at the time owned by a corrupt real it probably still is real estate developer, and it quoted the mayor as saying that we were responsible for the assault. So we were responsible for beating up our own people. Anyway, that was one of the incidents.
Well, they were really terrible. I mean, Shelley, because Shelley ran the McGovern thing in 68, and I think was really very, I don't know if she ran it, she was very involved with that. And the people really got beaten up in South Philly. Like that guy that I sent down there. And somebody else, who went to get him? Somebody had to go, somebody was like cornered, and maybe it was Myron. I don't remember, but somebody had to go rescue him. It was terrible. I poll watched once in South Philly in a special election primary. So it was in a neighborhood with a lot of homeowners, and the women didn't come to vote. I knew they didn't work, the women. It's an Italian neighborhood. But they didn't come to vote during the daytime. It was not a big turnout. They had a big, huge luncheon, and the desk was like here for the poll, so you came in to check in, and the machines were over there. And then there was this big spread that people could have to eat in the back. In those days, there was a spindle thing. You signed in on this card, and then it had 2 holes in it. You put on the spindle, but you tore it off. You know, it was a thing that part of the process of when you came to vote. So I said, "Where's everybody?" And they said, "Oh, they'll come after, at 5 o'clock when their husbands come home and stuff." So that happened, and so they'd come, and then they'd want to go in the polling place with their husbands. And the judge said, "Well, you can't do that because it's a special election." Of course, she meant it was a special election because I was there watching and wouldn't let them do it. It was actually a special election to replace somebody who had died or something. I don't remember what. It was too crazy. But what I did find out was these pieces of paper that looked like this, kind of with 2 holes in it. So this is where you'd sign in as a voter. So the committee person would take some of these and go off in the neighborhood and get them signed, and then bring them back and vote for those people. So that was the other thing they did. There were all kinds of wild stories about what people did to vote.
And it's still
Chicago,
still goes on when.
It's not so bad. This ward was bad. I think it still goes on. I'll never forget the Rizzo Charlie Bowser primary. Charlie Bowser was a black lawyer who ran for mayor against Rizzo. And I was the only white ward leader who endorsed him in the city. And in one of the black divisions in the 27th ward, I think Rizzo got 95 votes and Charlie got 91 votes or something like that. Well, that was just crazy. It was just crazy because that that the committee person was in the polling booth.
Yeah.
It wasn't gonna happen. So
yeah, we saw.
But I could never get poll workers to work there. I never had enough kind of independent black volunteers to put somebody in there, and they might have gotten beaten up anyway. But so it was very hard to undo that. That was Charlie Durham's guy. Again, I forgot his name. He was the committee person. It was very hard for me to control that. I should have been able to better. I must not have been hard-hearted enough. I should have not given him any money and read him the Riot Act more.
Well, when you then ran for city council, that seems to have been a kind of pivotal moment in your life, was it? Well, a lot of things changed for you after that election, right?
Yeah. Well, it was very interesting. It was, to learn to go around the city and see the different parts of the city. That was really it. It was really interesting to do. It was very interesting. I learned a lot doing that. And maybe I should have run again. I could have, because Wilson Good was running, and I could have been on the ticket. I don't know. I just wasn't sure that was a good thing to do then. But at any rate, did I step down before? I can't remember.
Well, I thought you kind of left it all, didn't you?
No, I never left at all. When Wilson was mayor, I was on the L&I Review Board. I was chairperson of the L&I License and Spending Review Board. It was a minor board. And so I couldn't be ward leader and do that. I had to be out of politics. But I only did that for a few years. And then when he ran again, I'm not sure. I have to think about maybe I became ward leader in 73, not 75. I'm not really sure. It could have been 73 and not 75.
Well, it seems
Or
pivotal.
74. I don't know. It was 10 years from one day to the other. Then I found Kevin Vaughn to take over.
But I mean, I remember it being a big change because you got divorced and
Right.
you changed your
That's
whole
true.
life
I did
around.
get divorced some months after, probably the following year, right? Yeah, that was a big change.
And you met Debbie, and everything kind of
Change.
changed. So what
Right.
was that like? How were those things related? First of all,
Well, I think that the divorce was, I mean, we were, not getting along so wonderfully. You remember fighting and stuff.
you
Dinner
you
table.
guys never seemed to get along. At least not as long as I was conscious.
Well, Sunday dinners were always very not so hot. And remember, we would go out for dinner, and that was much nicer because we were in a public place and people had to behave themselves. They couldn't yell at each other, so that was much better. I think you and your father particularly had contentions at the dinner table.
Oh, really?
As I remember, I don't
What,
know.
what were they about?
I don't remember. Whatever it was.
I remember I confirmed with Adam, my younger brother, that
I know he's your younger brother.
he didn't talk to me throughout high school. And
Adam
I
didn't
said,
talk to you?
no, my father. And I said, Adam, is that memory true? And he's like, yeah, that was his memory too. That he decided to not talk to me. So for 4 years. So I think whatever
I don't
arguments
remember.
you're thinking about must have been before high school.
I just remember that you guys fought too much. It was very unpleasant. I think that, and he was I guess he was jealous. I don't know.
Well, that was my
I
memory.
mean, like he didn't want Adam to have, was it Adam? No, Jonathan. I guess years and years ago, Adam, we're going to have a birthday party for Adam, and he didn't like that idea. That just, I think it was Adam, or maybe it was Jonathan's birthday. I don't remember whose birthday. It was just craziness. Why should he didn't want me to have a birthday party for whichever one of them you it was. It wasn't you. It was either Adam or John. I think it was John. It was too crazy. That was just that was really crazy.
But so at some point, but that year was what year was that? 80 or something that you ran and lost?
79.
79? And you
Yeah.
came close to winning though, right? You were only like 100 votes short or something?
No, I don't know. I was probably more than that. I think you elected, was it 5 and I came in 6th or 7th? I can't remember. I came in, Miriam Gaffney ran in 71. I guess the election for mayor was in 71, not in 70, 71. Shelley ran in 75, and I ran in 79, and all of us came in the same, 6th or 7th, whatever it was. We just missed.
Well, I also remember.
And I remember trying to negotiate. I was negotiating to get Shelley on the ticket.
Well, I also remember my father saying he thought you lost because you didn't. There was some kind of compromise you were being asked to make, and you refused.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's true. If I was asked, okay, this was the deal with Jimmy Tyoon, who went to jail eventually for bribery. The deal was if I would agree to vote for Jimmy Tyoon for council presidency, on the second vote, he would throw his support to me. I had a lot of support. I mean, it wasn't me doing it. I had hired, I don't know who, Carol Ann, and there were a lot of people involved in my campaign. I mean, doing the back room stuff, some of them. It was Elliot Curzon did that TV ad, which was, again, pretty unusual to have. And I can't remember the guy's name. He was actually another Republican operative, but he negotiated with people. And so Tyoon, if I had agreed to do that, I would have probably won because Tyoon would have thrown his wards, the ones he controlled in South Philly and then the river wards, to me. But I just didn't see how I could honorably do that and then represent the good government liberal piece of the world. If I were to make a deal with a guy like Tayyoun, it just didn't work right, you know? And some people said, well, it wouldn't happen. I wouldn't have to do it. It wouldn't go to a second vote. But, you know, what if it did? It just didn't seem right. I just couldn't do it. And then he went to jail. So not just then, but eventually he was sent to jail for bribery or whatever he did. He came out and ran a newspaper successfully for a long time. He was a character. You had to like Jimmy. I mean, he was. I think you may have gone to, I don't remember if we took you guys. He had a Lebanese or something restaurant in South Philly way, way, way back when we went once.
But somehow that election and its outcome, you very much changed your life after that, no?
Right. I guess, you know, being off doing campaigning on my own and stuff like that, I guess I decided really this wasn't going to work very well. And we were just too divergent on stuff we wanted to do.
I also remember when I ran, there was something about being in public. Well, you're much more social than I am. Your social instinct is off the charts. But for me, like campaigning and being in front of the public every day and interacting with people all day long, so that there was not, you know, if I would walk down the street and forget to say hello to somebody or just minding my own business, people would take offense. So there was an aspect of just having to be on game 24 hours a day was very, I don't know, it affected me. I don't know if you've experienced that when you campaign.
Well, it was a bigger arena with more candidates, so I probably, you know, I would go to make speeches, but I'd be one of 10 people, so you get 3 minutes or something, you know, most of the time, and you talk to people. I was fine making speeches, that I could do. I'm not such a good, what do you call it, cocktail, you know.
Retail?
There's a word for it.
Retail.
What?
Retail.
No, that's not the word. Talk kind of person. No, I wasn't so good at talking to people, just, you know, but just meet and greet. I'm not that great at that. That's a real gift. You have to look at people. I will never forget Jimmy Carter. He would look at you, and you know, whoever he was talking to, and you were the only person in the room, the only person in the world. And when I had gone one day, because I was ward leader, I went to meet Udall. We had breakfast with Udall, and then the ward leaders met Jimmy Carter the same day. And the difference, I just knew it was going to be Jimmy Carter. It was just so clear that he could do this and knew who you were right away. It was just amazing, his ability to do that. It's a gift. You have to cultivate it, I guess.
Bill Clinton,
but he was great at it.
Clinton was famous for that, too.
Well, he may have been, I mean, they both, that's fine. I mean, they're just good at that.
Yeah. So what?
That's why you always take an advanced person with you to write down whatever somebody said to you so you could remember it, you know. Yeah. If they wanted a request, you had somebody with you who would take notes, and
yeah,
so you could follow up with them and stuff.
Yeah.
I remember the time I had to go talk in North Philly, way up somewhere. Remember the Pacer? The car, the automobile.
Yeah.
Remember we went up to Vermont, and all of us, to go skiing in that little thing, remember?
I don't remember that, but I remember the Pacer. I remember getting into doing skidding in the wintertime and doing a 360 in it.
Well, I had to drive back one night from some campaign thing in first or second all the way down Roosevelt Boulevard because it was frozen.
Oh, first, second gear.
Yeah, first or second gear.
Yeah. Wow. But you were saying something about it, the Pacer? You went to...
No, that's what I was saying. I remember driving home one night in the pacer, and I couldn't go couldn't get out of first or second gear. That's all. And then we all went to Vermont once, and because the station wagon didn't work, something was the matter with the station wagon. I don't remember what it was, but so we all piled into the pacer, and I can't believe it, but we all got in with our ski stuff.
Oh yeah, I don't remember that.
Remember we went to Chicotee or something like that? What was it? Peachy or something.
Peachy, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago. Let me ask you this: do you consider yourself a feminist?
I guess. I don't think I was really as active. I remember having a conversation with somebody in the ward many years ago who was pissed off she never got called on, and she felt discriminated against. But I don't know. Maybe I just didn't pay attention. I guess I just spoke up if I had something to say, so I didn't feel put down. Because I guess I'd always been kind of in a leadership role or something. I don't know what it was. So I didn't feel as put down. I felt like if I had something to say, I could get it heard. So in that sense, that conversation with that person in the ward didn't work for me because I didn't feel put upon in that way. I don't think I was aware enough of how bad it was for women.
So when the women's rights movement became, you were not as that involved in it, or that?
I don't think I was that involved in it. I mean, I was certainly for the for the ERA and everything. I went to marches and stuff, but I don't think I was never in a feminist group, a uplifting group. A lot of women had little groups that they met together and bitched about things. I don't remember I didn't do that. I don't know why. I was much more involved in getting people elected or trying to get policies changed, and the ward and then in Americans for Democratic Action, which is kind of it still barely exists.
Is that a national organization or just a local?
It is a national, but it barely exists anymore. But it was most strong in Philadelphia, was one of its biggest chapters. And the man who had been the first executive director in Philadelphia became the national executive director. And he was, sometimes these people are just really great at doing things and their successes aren't so wonderful and things don't stay the same. It's hard sometimes. And the young people who've taken over the local just don't, well, we used to have money too. So we had and there's no money anymore. So, but there was money so they could hire staff who could do some stuff. And, they ran the recall against Rizzo but it's sort of fallen apart. And their aims were just not, I quit it because they were talking stuff that just wasn't going to work. So I don't know. The young people, I just didn't see eye to eye with them, I guess.
Yeah. What changes today do you think are most? Well, how about this? What changes today are you most hopeful about?
I'm not real hopeful about things, but I think the main things that we have to change is the whole poverty piece, the whole inequity. That's got to change. Somehow we have got to change the distribution of wealth and of services. We just cannot have it the way it is now. It's just, can you imagine people where you live in New York and North Philadelphia, 5 people in a small room, 10 people in a small room. They can't go outside. They can't go anywhere. The kids are supposed to be on a computer. There is only one table. It's in the kitchen. And nobody knows how to use a computer in the first place and get them to school. I mean, it's just untenable. The lack of, low and moderate income housing. Look at your cousin can't find a place to live. She says that she has to have $40,000 in the bank in order to get an apartment. That's ridiculous. Very few people have $40,000 in the bank.
Yeah, they want to see 3 months or 3 years.
Well, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, that is ridiculous.
I mean, I can't believe it's true. But I think because of the pandemic, there's also not very many things changing hands. Nobody's moving. I mean, there's somebody moving out down the street from me today, as a matter of fact. And that's considered essential. You can do that. However, people don't have a job. They're not going anywhere, mostly. So, I mean, I think but I'm not hopeful. I don't know if I made phone calls yesterday afternoon into Monroe County to ask people if they want to vote in the Democratic primary, but for the state Democrats. Most people didn't answer the phone at all, got an answering machine. They don't answer. It's not like they were out somewhere, unless they were out hunting or something. I don't know what the hell they were doing. I don't know what part of Monroe County. But I got people who weren't going to vote in the primary. They were going to change from being a Democrat to being independent. I had a couple of Trump people. Now, this was supposed to be a Democratic list. So when you go up there, do you see a lot of Trump signs on people's lawns?
The phone calls are all home phones?
Yeah. Oh, I had one doctor's phone. It was the wrong number probably for the person.
Well, so most of the people you're calling then are probably senior citizens because nobody has home phones anymore.
No, I know what their ages were. I had a couple of seniors, but they weren't. They were all ages from 18 to 93.
With home phones?
Well, I don't know what phone I think they were home phones, yeah.
Because nobody I know uses a home phone anymore.
Well, maybe it was a cell phone.
Oh, well, if it's cell phones.
I don't know what kind of phones they were.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
I wouldn't have a clue what kind of phones they were.
Oh, okay. They might have been cell phones then. But yeah, I mean, I know Monroe County. I don't know that much about it, but I think it's Democratic mostly. It's for a while there. It was the fastest growing county on the East Coast.
Right, I know that. And those were people coming from New York, so I would have thought maybe they would have made it more Democratic. I'm not sure it's usually Democratic. But look and see if you see, when we go to the country, we see Trump signs. Do you see Trump signs as you drive around near you?
Just because you see Trump signs doesn't mean it's not majority Democratic. There are, but no, I don't see a lot of. I mean, I don't really pay that much attention, and you don't see any signs. Well, you see, the only signs you see that I see up there are, for local sheriff and stuff. It's you don't see a lot of national signs. I mean, and I don't pay attention to what bumper stickers people have.
Not bumper stickers. Up in Quakertown, there are signs on people's lawns, Trump and what's his name?
I don't know.
Whatever the vice president.
Well, I mean, Eastern Pennsylvania is more Democratic than, I mean, I think it's mostly Democratic.
No, I know. The other day I made calls into Mercer County, and
but the swing part
that's way west.
Yeah, the swing part of the state is west of Philadelphia, and
No. This was way west. This is not the suburbs. I made Mercer County is past Pittsburgh someplace. I don't know where it is. And I had making calls there, but only 3 people picked up the phone. 3 or 4 people. One said fuck Dems. One was going to vote,
Dems.
and one didn't. One had no computer, and the library's closed, so she could not. She wanted to vote in the primary, but the stupid people who gave me the list didn't give me a phone number for her to call to get a ballot to mail in. So I had to tell her to call the Mercer County office because I didn't know what it was. And
so you're still doing a lot of volunteering for political causes and elections, and that keeps you.
I'm still a committee person.
You're still a committee person. That's an elected.
I am
an elected position.
I wasn't while I was ward leader for a while, but there's nobody, where I live, there's like 10 permanent residents.
Well, what keeps you? If you're not hopeful, what keeps you doing it?
Well, you have to keep trying,
You don't
you
have
have
to.
to be,
Who has to?
well, I think one has to keep trying to change things. You have to try to make it better.
Well,
However you,
I've been
I
taught.
don't know. I think I'm just used, I have a big, you see my flat forehead from running into brick walls.
I've been taught to use the I to make I statements, and
What?
I said I've been taught to make I statements rather than saying you have to do something. So what makes you what? Why do you think you're driven in that way?
I don't know. I just keep trying. I'm not sure why. Just trying to make a difference somehow. I don't know why exactly. Somebody asked me that a long time ago. Why do I keep running into brick walls? Maybe one day the wall will fall down and we will get we'll have a change. That's all. So yeah, it's the Chinese torture. You drip and drip and drip. I'm just a drip. I drip and drip and drip, and someday it'll happen. But mostly it's cyclical. So we've had our wins and we've had our losses, and we'll have more wins and we'll have more losses.
I think it keeps you going.
Right, keeps me going.
But so, what do you? Was there something you think in your early childhood that made this your motivator, your like purpose?
I don't know. Let's see. I was co-captain of the Reds or the Blues in camp one year. I think the first woman student body town meeting chairperson at Cambridge School in anybody's memory.
So this began before those things.
I don't know.
It must be deep inside of you. I mean, your mother was very opinionated and had very strong beliefs, but I don't know if it's from listening to her.
Well, she was a Roosevelt Democrat, but my father hated Roosevelt.
Oh yeah? Who did he like?
Yeah, he was a businessman. Well, he was a Republican. He hated Roosevelt.
Oh, I didn't know your father was a Republican. Who did he like?
Yeah, he was.
He hated
Roosevelt.
He hated FDR?
Yeah, because they were, just like all the Republicans today don't want, they feel threatened. I don't know why, because when more people have more stuff, they're going to do better. I mean, and you don't need to have, I'm not sure the dates, but the lower income people had a 20% raise in their income, whereas the upper income people had a 420% raise in their income over the last, I don't remember what from 80 to now or 90 to now. I don't know the dates. But that's just too disgraceful. It's when Warren Buffett pays less taxes than his secretary. And he just did a terrible thing too, but anyway.
I didn't know your father was a Republican, and I was surprised you didn't mention like finding him as a teenager as a big change point in your life. That didn't.
Well, my father died when I was 16.
Yeah.
And but he didn't ever really live in the house. I don't remember him ever sleeping in the same house except once or twice. A couple of times it was very small. And then when we first moved back to New Orleans, so he would come to New Orleans all the time. And when he came to New Orleans, I would sometimes stay with him at Aunt Minnie's house. And, he did my mother's bookkeeping and everything, took care of all of finances. And, he never wanted to be divorced from her. And I remember him following the Second World War, like pins in a map and stuff like that. But he was definitely a Republican.
Oh, I didn't know.
But
that.
I don't know.
Why did your mother marry a Republican? I thought.
Well, I don't know if he was a Republican back when they got married. There wasn't any. They got married before the Depression. Who knows? I don't know when he became. He didn't. I don't say he was a Republican. I'll say that he didn't like FDR.
Oh.
And I don't know why he didn't think he was doing a good job leading the war effort. I don't know.
Somebody told me recently, the last time I was in New Orleans, which I didn't know, that your mother and father were married twice. or 3 times?
Right, didn't you find? Well, I was a bastard. Didn't you hear that one?
No, I don't know any of this. Tell me the story.
Well, I don't know the story really. So I found out, when did Aunt Mary die? 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago? How long ago did she die?
I don't remember exactly.
It doesn't matter exactly. But anyway, she was still alive. So after one of the Benjamin Minerals meetings, and we had supper on the upstairs, I went to say goodbye to Joan. And so Anne asked me, when were they married, when were they divorced? And you were married between, when they got married because she got pregnant again after they'd been divorced. And I didn't know what she was talking about. And Joan was hysterical because she said, now don't talk about that. Don't talk about that. She was embarrassed. She didn't want to talk about it. This was a taboo subject. So I didn't know anything about it. So I went back to the other end of the car to ask Mary, and she knew, but she didn't really remember anything. So Kathy knew all of this because she'd had to look up, I guess, when we got rid of Covington and Nyack, she had to get all the divorce and marriage papers to make sure that my father had no claim to Covington. So she knew it. I think she told me that Jane Lemon told her, Bernard's wife. But I had never heard it. So that's just so that you know your mother.
Tell me what it was.
The story, I don't know more than that they were divorced. Then my mother got pregnant, and then they got remarried. Then they got divorced again.
So you were born out of wedlock.
Yes, evidently. Well, no, I think they were remarried by the time I was born.
Oh, you were conceived out of wedlock.
Yeah, I can see that.
Huh.
Anyway, so.
Interesting. Well, on that note, if you had one thing to say to your grandchildren about change, what would it be? How to deal with change?
I just tell them to try to make positive change. That should be their life. They should try to make positive change. Try to change things to help people.
All right. Take after their grandmother.
No, I don't know if that, but they should try to help people and make change. And I think a lot of them are doing that, actually. They're teaching and I don't know. I think they should try to do that. I mean, that's what you were trying to do when you tried to get rid of the government in Weehawken, wasn't it?
I guess so.
What's it like there now?
You mean during the pandemic?
No, I meant the government. It's
the same entrenched people that have been there for literally like 40 years.
Well, I've been there for, 60 years.
In the same position?
So I'm entrenched. And it's funny because there is a group of more radical left group, like, what's the woman's name from New York? AOC? What's her name?
AOC?
So there's a group like that here, and they are running against incumbents who are okay. And it's just because we want to take over the state. And they keep saying, well, the incumbents don't do anything. Well, the thing is, the state is a Republican state. It's impossible to do anything with those crummy people. But
we got yesterday in the mail, I got in New Jersey, now all the ballots are being mailed. And I got them yesterday, and Emma got one too. And so I opened one, and I took a photograph and asked her if she wanted me to, well, I guess I shouldn't say this. If she wanted, if she wanted to vote, and how did she want to vote? And there's 3 people running in 2 questions, and the 3 people, there's no one opposing the 3 people, which is how all the elections here are. There's nobody runs except the incumbents and the people that the incumbents pick. And Emma said, I don't know any of those people. And then I said, well, what about the questions? She hasn't answered yet. But the questions were all, of course, to spend more money. This is the school election. And, school board members and school budget bond type questions. But you can read what it says, and it sounds fine. I mean, well, one thing is just a number, like we want to bond for X millions of dollars, and then the other is
well, it usually tells you something about whether they want to spend it for.
It's the school year.
But,
it's the school's budget. And
okay.
And then the second one was they wanted to spend money on well, it was a bunch of stuff involving mental health, and and they were big price tags, like a couple $1 million for a little town, but there's not enough information.
But your town must collect pretty decent taxes. You have some pretty well-to-do houses and stuff. I mean, they must have pretty good taxes there, right?
I mean, New Jersey has the highest taxes in the world, practically, or in the country and in the world. So.
But wait a minute. But that New Jersey isn't the same as the towns.
We're one of the New Jersey towns, and I don't know if it has the highest but it's among the it's among the highest in the world. So we have very high taxes.
You're talking two separate things, Ben. One is state and one is local. We have state and local taxes. So we have bonds for Philadelphia too, and we have to pay for our own schools.
In New Jersey, the state taxes are not a significant thing. It's the property taxes that are the big tax, in which is true most places. So the local taxes, it's the property taxes that are the biggest taxes. And I don't know where Weehawken is exactly compared to the average, but they're all clustered. And so. But my point is that I know as a young voter, Emma first says she doesn't know who the people are, and there's no choice anyway. And then in terms of the questions, I haven't looked to see if she's answered me yet. But let me see. She might have answered, but I'm sure she has.
It doesn't matter. What are the questions?
I told you it's about spending more money, and she'll have no idea.
Well, of course, but haven't they done a really fine job for you on Brina, on Jace? And don't you think they need more mental health money? I mean, my God, with all the veterans and all the homeless people and everything.
I don't think it's. I think it's for schools. It's for schools. It's not for.
Okay, but aren't you happy with what they did for you in the schools?
It's not first of all, my point is that there's two questions on the ballot, and someone like Emma, a 20-something. There's not nearly enough information there for her to make an informed decision, and there won't be any way for her to find out more information because there's no local press or anything discussing it, and so she'll have to just go by the one or two sentences that describe what it's for. And
well, there was legislation passed by the town hall or something. They had to propose something,
but then I can answer you about your question, which is kind of weird, that the first person that I knew that died from the coronavirus was the man who sued us to prevent our kid from going to a special school. And, it cost $20,000 to fight the school board to get the proper, to get him the proper education. So we were, very happy with how it turned out, but it was the result of a lawsuit, which you should remember. And we had the state, what was it? The
You never told me much. You guys are pretty close about what. I knew you had some kind of a fight over it, but I never knew exactly what it was.
Yeah, we.
Where the school board fought you, you had to sue the school board.
No. Well, it actually ended up being. It was an interesting case that could have been a precedent. We had the chair of the education law, what's it called, Education Law Center. Anyway, one of the top education lawyers in the country.
Yeah, no, I know what we have that here too. They're great.
Represented us, and I forget her name, but it was an interesting case where our child went to a charter school, and the charter schools are considered in some ways quasi-independent districts. They have kind of control over their own things. So they had their own. They went through their own process of individualized education program, an IEP program, and they made a determination that our child should be placed out of district and in a special school because they couldn't handle it. But because they're not an entirely independent district, the funding for charter schools comes from the regular public school district,
Right.
which would be the town that we live in. The school board of the town where we live sued the charter school and sued both the charter school and us to prevent the placement. And then, as you know, we had to defend ourselves, and the school board had to defend them. The charter school had to defend themselves, and the result was tens of thousands of dollars legal fees for us, and they ended up doing what the charter school had determined in the first place. But basically, the man who made us go through all that, although they were doing their due diligence, I guess, but it was kind of strange to see. He was also, he was part of the machine here. He was one of these people that had 5 positions and ran on a
So let me ask you this: if Chase had been at Weehawken Grammar School, elementary school, and they had recommended, would they have recommended the same thing, that they couldn't handle it? Do you think?
Well, we can't go back in time, but basically once they did their due diligence, they agreed to it. So with it, whether they would have done it if we weren't an educated family with legal support, with legal firepower on our side,
right.
What they would have done, I'm not 100% sure. But we ended up, I don't know if I ever told you this story, but there was one moment. It was long after the settlement. In fact, the lawsuit happened when he was in grammar school, and I think he was going into middle school.
It was 5th grade, I think.
Yeah, it was going middle school.
He was
starts
10.
6th grade. Middle school starts in 6th grade. 6, 7, 8. Yeah, middle school. Going to middle school, and then
I think he went in 5th grade to the other school.
So what happened was, there was a key decision point, which is when he went to high school. So I don't know if the settlement was over or whatever, but it was being revisited. And we sat down with the head of the special education and the case manager. And, we had been operating in a fairly adversarial way up until that point because of the lawsuit and because poor communication and various factors. And at one point, the case manager said, what were your expectations for your child? And so this would have been like eighth grade, and we were still kind of figuring out what, and he had learning disabilities and all kinds of issues that made it very hard to figure out what was going on and what he was capable of and where he would end up in life and anything. And I could feel my blood starting to boil because I could feel like it felt like she might be trying to pigeonhole him in some kind of a lower expectation, some kind of a narrower set of expectations, or, I didn't know what she wanted. And so I just spoke from my heart and said, I have no idea what to expect from him. It was very unclear. I mean, he was a young kid. And, I had no idea. I had no idea whether he could go to college or not go to college. I had no idea whether he would graduate high school. I had no idea what would happen with him. And I said the same was true for my older child, who had normal, didn't have any learning disability, any major learning disabilities or anything like that. I said I had no idea what to expect from her either. And so whatever I said, once I finished, the head of the special education for the school district just started talking about how much he loved the kids and how he was dedicated to being a coach, and he was just like gushing with like love for the kids. And they ended up giving us the more money to send our kid to private special school than any other kid in the history of the town. So, and that was just from that. I think it was just from that conversation that they it was just being open and honest with them, and they were great. They ended up being great, and they ended up being our advocates, and it went 180 degrees once it got out of the whole kind of, and when it first started and they sued us, of course this would have been after my election, after the election, so we were also kind of a little bit paranoid.
Well, wasn't it way after that? I thought it was quite a time after that.
I'd have to go back, but it was within a couple of years of the election, and so we were still a little bit paranoid that there might be some political shenanigans going on in it, but we weren't sure. But anyway, by the time he got to high school, it was definitely way after, and we were kind of off the radar, and so it turned out good. Well, thank you for being on my podcast, and there's lots more we could talk about, but I'm going to have to chop.
Well, it's time to go. I have to go cut the grass while the sun is out.
All right.
And it's probably dried out. It's been raining so badly here. For days and days, it's going to rain tomorrow, but the grass has grown, so I need to go cut the grass.
Well, don't push the mower too hard.
Well, I only have a little tiny mower. It's a little push mower, and it works fine. I don't have a lot of grass.
That's why you recovered from COVID, is because you're pushing the mower.
Probably. I have more grass than you do, but it's maybe not as good. I don't know. Mine is mostly weeds now.
Mine's all weeds, although I planted a few more seeds because they die every year because the dog pees all over everything.
Well, I'm going to go do that now.
Well,
all righty. Well,
good to talk.
All right, love. Talk to you eventually. You have to edit it like crazy because otherwise it'll be much too tedious for people.
I got to edit all your cursing out.
I didn't say a lot of cursing, did I? I did start cursing, though. I think that was a byproduct of being in political stuff. All right. I'm going to go cut the grass and get outside while the weather's nice.
All right. Enjoy. It is
Thank
beautiful
you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Nature Breakthroughs podcast with Dr. Wild Ben Goldman to discover what you need for personal, organizational, and societal change. Get your free download of 3 ancient rituals smart entrepreneurs use to bounce back from shifts in the market and inside themselves. Go to www.naturebreakthroughs.com.